Welcome to Life Mastery Radio with Todd Allen and Jackie Bailey, the show that dives into the science of higher consciousness with inspiring topics such as abundance, intention, health, manifestation, love, and transformation. Join Todd, Jackie, and their guests of leading authors, speakers, coaches, and entrepreneurs weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific. Learn to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery. It's all right here with stories and messages to support your well-being and most evocative dreams. Now, here's your hosts, Todd and Jackie.
Hey, it's another groovy day, and that's because, and most of you know, I make it that way. When I get up in the morning, I decide it's going to be a groovy day, and that's the way it happens. Is it working, Jack? I get a message.
It is.
Okay. Just some technical difficulties, but I think you get the gist of it. I start out my day with the idea that it's going to be groovy, and everything that happens, I can either decide it's groovy or change the thoughts about it being groovy, and it's a cool way to do it. You can do it too. Try it. You'll like it. Welcome to Life Mastery Radio, the talk show that brings you great thoughts and ideas for you to use on your very own life mastery journey. Jackie and I bring you guests that are coaches, speakers, leaders, and they are on the very edge of their own becoming. But the really cool part is they're here to share with you thoughts and ideas for you to jump off that edge and become the person that you were supposed to be or that you're supposed to be. We have a really cool guest today. We're going to be talking about our thoughts, and we're going to be touching some subjects that I don't think you've probably ever thought about before. So stick with us. But first, I want to introduce my co-host, my good friend, compadre. She's not really riding shotgun, but she's definitely a big supporter of Life Mastery Radio, Jackie Bailey. Hi, Jackie.
Hello. Great to be here.
She's getting ready to go to LA. Her life, her reality has just blossomed. She's got many things cooking, but this week I think she's focused on Los Angeles and remind me
the Best View Expo.
The Best View Expo.
Yeah.
Lots of people.
Our guest last week, Bernardo Moya, is the organizer of that event. He's done it in a lot of places in the world, and he's now in LA this week. And not only am I speaking twice, but I have two clients of mine, adult clients, who are also speaking. And Uma Bambrew, my 10-year-old student, she's been with me about a year and a half, learning public speaking skills. She's going to be on stage delivering her keynote speech at 10 years old. And of course, you can imagine that she's feeling a little nervous right about now. But she's also very excited at the opportunity.
I bet.
So, and I'll have a booth there, so we'll be playing some games at our booth and meeting lots and lots of people, and just having a really fun time.
So last week you mentioned sponsoring some of your students that might not be able to afford that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think it was, what was it, $49, and you can help support a young person find and speak their heart. Is that right?
That is correct. However, that is for the Voices of Women Summit that actually happens a week from tomorrow, March 8th. That is in conjunction with International Women's Day. And my friend Kimberly Crow has organized this summit 3 years in a row now. And she's allowing young women ages 10 to 20 to speak on the Voices of Women Summit. And there is a $49 admin fee to speak, but we are looking for sponsors that will allow a young woman to not have to pay that $49 fee, but still be allowed to speak. Yeah. And so many of my students are going to be on that summit. It is virtual, but they're coming from all over the world. I've got a student in Massachusetts and California, and a couple of them here locally that will also be on that summit once we get back.
Very
so
cool.
Lots of things happening there.
Where do they find out more? At speakfeedlead.org.
Yes, if they go to speakfeedlead.org, there you go. And then on the page or the tab that says Make a Difference, one of those fundraising campaigns that we have going on, because we are a nonprofit, it will say sponsor a youth speaker. And if you click on that, you'll be able to go. You'll see that it is specifically right now for the Voices of Women Summit. And it's just $49 if you want to sponsor one girl.
Very
And
cool.
we'll match you up with one of those speakers so that you can watch her on the summit and hear what your sponsorship has done, the impact that it makes for these girls.
My goodness, I can hardly keep up with you. Just Google Jackie Bailey and you'll see everything that she's involved with. It's very cool.
JackieBailey360.com, as a matter of fact. If you go there, that's the hub to find everything about me. FBI doesn't have to look any further than Jackie.
I am totally, Jackie, I am just totally blown away. You have impressed the blondness out of my hair. No, I don't know. I want to remind our listeners.
It all happens when you make a mind shift, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today. So
we certainly are going to talk about that. I want to remind our listeners that today's show page is at www.lifemasteryradio.com. You can go there. Any links that we talk about today will be on that show page. And I think we already have a bunch of them, but we might bring up a different one. So check that out. We have a YouTube channel. All of our shows go up into YouTube. So if you missed your show, we have many topics. We should put out a list of all those topics. It's just amazing, the amazing people that we get to talk to every week and bring you their great thoughts and ideas. So check us out in all those places. While you're on our website, sign up for Jackie's newsletter. The newsletter goes out once a week and it highlights who's been on the show, who's coming on the show, and a blog post about the show that we just did. So you can stay informed. All things life mastery. Both of our books are there. Jackie has multiple books, and I'm guilty. I got to get some more of her books up there, but we'll be working on that. Okay, Jackie, I just have one question before we bring in our guest. If I told you you are not your thoughts, what would you say?
I would agree. I would buy into that, and I'm actually more my emotion than I am my thoughts. And we'll see if our guest agrees with that.
That's a good answer. It wasn't that long ago, though, you wouldn't have thought that, right?
That's true. That is very true. This being a co-host of this show has really opened my mind and my heart to many other talents and skills that people have, and so much more about myself. So I'm hoping that our listeners get as much as I have from this.
I feel like I've done my job. No, I'm just kidding.
I was your project. I was your hopeless project.
Not hopeless. I just knew there was more in the mirror. Okay. Let's get on with the show. Our guest today is Thomas Sterner, and he is the author of The Practicing Mind, Fully Engaged, and most recently, I think real recently, It's Just a Thought, Emotional Freedom Through Deliberate Thinking. Thomas is the CEO of the Practicing Mind Institute, and he is an in-demand speaker and coach working with high-performance industry groups and individuals, including athletes, to help them operate effectively in high-stress situations and experience new levels of mastery. Prior to writing the best-selling The Practicing Mind, Thomas studied Eastern and Western philosophy and modern sports psychology and trained as a jazz pianist. He lives in Wilmington, Delaware, off in that upper corner of the United States. And Thomas, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you today?
I am fine, and I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on our show and telling us about these great thoughts and how we are not our thoughts. But before we get into that, how did you get involved into this?
Well, if you go back to The Practicing Mind, when I was young, I was extremely undisciplined. And but what saved me was I was aware of the thoughts that went along with being undisciplined. And I thought there's a system here and I just haven't figured it out. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I realized that if I couldn't see a task through that I chose myself, whether that was learning to play the piano, gymnastics, whatever it was, if I couldn't if I was going to pick a task and then I was going to drop out of it, as soon as I burned up the initial enthusiasm, then I was just never going to reach my potential. So that was when I knew I had a problem I had to solve. I didn't have any idea how that was going to happen. And the catalyst, or at least I guess the thing that jump started me, was when I was in college. A really close friend of mine, a guy that I've been friends for years, gave me the textbook to his Philosophies of the World course. And it was, I don't know, 400 pages. And it just went through all the different religions of the world, both Eastern and Western. And I ate that thing up. I just couldn't get enough of it. And that really kind of started me on the whole concept of present moment functioning and everything. And I began to turn my life around. And within a few years, I was a completely different person. And then I just kept going. I got into, as you said, sports psychology, neuroscience, and I've continued to study all of that stuff as I've gone through life. And I find it fascinating. It's a fascinating time. We're learning so much about the relationship between our mind, our body, the universe, how it all works. And there is definitely a shift that's taking place.
It's fascinating to me that you had that awareness in high school. For me, the only awareness I had was, where was I going to get more green stuff to smoke?
Well, that wasn't me. I was just always I was very detail oriented. I was very practical, but I was also very spiritual. So I was interested in, how do I work and how do I fit into the universe? And, and I love to learn. So they all kind of went together.
Yeah.
Is that generational? Is that something that you feel that you learned from your parents, or that your parents inspired that way of thinking?
Well, my parents had very limited educations, as most of the people did back then. They thought the only people that, if you talked about meditation, they didn't know what that was. It was something that hippies did when they were high. It really wasn't something that, there was nowhere to go for that. But in terms of their personalities, yes, my mother was very spiritual. Both my parents were very spiritual. My mother was very disciplined, very quiet, very focused. And my father was just brilliantly creative. And so, I grew up between the two of them. I was just always being exposed. My personality was more like my mother's, but I didn't have any brothers. So my father took me everywhere. And I was always, his attitude of, it was never, can I do it? That's already a given. It's just, I just got to figure it out. So, so anyway, I had that. And so that's why when I realized that, look, I have got to change who I am if I want to be happy, it never occurred to me that I couldn't figure it out. It was like, well, I just have to figure out how to figure it out. And that was what started me. And once I got a smell of what it felt like to be disciplined and have a quieter mind and be able to accomplish any task and not feel like I was impatient and struggling to do it, that just really changed everything for me.
That's when. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to ask if being a pianist was also helpful. Did music give you that sense of belonging, or did that help you in your spiritual journey at all?
Well, actually, yes. I played music I started when I was about 4, but what was really unusual about my circumstances then was that I had gone into, gotten a degree at the University of Delaware, but I didn't do it. It was turf and horticulture. So I was supposed to be like a golf course superintendent. The only reason I did that was because I didn't know what to do when I got out of high school. And the guidance counselor said, well, what do you do in the summer? I said, I usually work in people's yards. He said, do you like that? And I said, yeah. He goes, why don't you go into landscape? And I said, sounds good to me. And that was, how I went. But what really changed that was I got into piano technology when I was about 19. And it's a very unusual trade. I don't know that it's going away because there are not very many people that are taking piano lessons, and the acoustic piano as an instrument is dying off because the digital stuff is so good. Right. It's much less expensive. But the thing that was so unique about the piano technology work that was a really good incubator for what I was doing is that everything on a piano happens at least 88 times. And people don't think about that, but there's like 235 strings on a piano. There's you got 88 notes, but there's about 5,000 parts in a keyboard, and each note has about 34 adjustments. And, having to immerse myself in that, and you're always working in solitude. So I really had to figure out, it's so tedious and could be so mind numbing that I had to figure out a way to love the process of working on the piano, because I was very, very successful at it. And I made a lot of money at it, and I had one of the best shops in the United States. And I also was, I was young, but by the time I was 23, I had every credential that was available. And so I spent a lot of time by myself, and I worked a lot of hours, 65 to 70 hours a week, because I was so in demand. So there was, as far as a proving field, I was always looking at, I would get up in the morning and I had to do the same thing I did yesterday and the day before times 1,000. And you really had to have a mindset where you looked forward to that and you got lost in the process. So it was really a blessing in many ways.
Training ground. Yeah.
Yep.
That's amazing, because it came from hard work. Is that what you're trying to tell us, Thomas? It was putting in the time.
It was the repetition more than anything else. Like I said, if I told you I want you to turn this screw, let's just say you want to replace the key bushings, in a piano. Well, there's 4 bushings per note, and there's 88 notes, and you got to take each. They're little. You're talking about a 1/4 inch by a 1/4 inch piece of felt, and if you're replacing them, you have to take all of them out and put all new ones in, and each one has to be individually cut. And that's just one facet of one process. And that's what I'm saying. You were doing that. And when you finished that keyboard, there was 10 others stacked against the wall that needed to be done. So it was just the mindset of this stuff caving in on you. You just couldn't get away from the repetition. So how do you deal with this? Because we spend most of our time being very attached to the goal. Like, we want closure. Yeah. We want the job done. We want the kids picked up. We want the grocery shopping done. We want the report done. Well, you couldn't have that mindset working on pianos, because it just went on and on and on and on. And so you had to retrain yourself to want to be where you were doing what you were in that moment. Otherwise, it would have just driven you crazy.
Yeah, you would have lost interest and
done poor work. Then I would have done poor work.
I think they call that the succession to burnout, right? That's when you start to get bored and no interest. And yeah, that's very cool. Well, it sounds like we're starting to get into the mind, but before we get too far into that, we need to define a couple things, I think. And so tell us your thoughts about what the conscious mind is and what the subconscious mind is.
Well, the conscious mind, I would say, is you. And the conscious mind is actually the observer of everything else, or that's what it should be. The problem with us is that we live what neuroscience says about 95% of the time we're in the behaviors of the subconscious mind. So this is how it works. The language of the subconscious mind is feelings. So it doesn't pay much attention to the words. It pays attention to the feelings and the images that those feelings that are happening outside of you. So you have a stimulus outside of you, and that stimulus could be a situation that makes you nervous, or a person that triggers you, just to give an example. And the subconscious mind is this very elegant, non-judgmental recording system, and it's extremely accurate, and it watches and it sees how you react to the situation, how you feel, what the feeling is, because the feeling is the thought. The thought creates the feeling, and the feeling is really electromagnetic energy, and it has data in it. And so the subconscious, it receives that, and it says in its mind, or in its system, it says, when this person walks in the room, this is the file that's on the hard drive. So that person walks in the room, it pulls the file off, it plays it, and you experience this behavior, this emotional content. And for the most part, because during the day we have this going on 95% of the time, we're not actually the thinker of our thoughts. We're being thought by our subconscious. And so but we don't know that, because we've always been doing it and it feels normal. In fact, we really feel like we are the ones who are thinking. And there's a story I tell, which I think really exemplifies this. I had a very high level executive one time, and we were having this exact conversation. And he said to me that he didn't buy it. He said, I don't buy that modality. He said, I think I am thinking, I'm making the decisions of what I'm going to think. And this, and when he finished, to make a point, I said, did I tell you to talk? You're the student here. You need to shut up and sit there. And as soon as I did that, of course, his subconscious said, well, what do we do when this happens? And he got insulted and all this sort of stuff. I said, now you see, did you make a conscious decision to feel the way you feel now? Is it fun? How do you feel right now? Are you in control? I don't think you are. And it was a real awakening for the guy. He said, man, he goes, thank you. He said, like, you're absolutely right. I said, well, that's what's going on all day. You're being stimulated by what you hear, by what you see, by who walks in the room, by what the task is that you've just been given to do. And you have taught your subconscious mind, just because you don't know you're doing it doesn't mean you're not doing it. It's all, the recorder is always running. And so you're either in control of it or you're being controlled by it. And so it's forming these programs all the time. And there's reason for this. The subconscious, what it does is it takes a load off of the brain. The brain has a certain level of computational capacity. And when the subconscious mind sees something being repeated, whether it's a physical motion like in a golf swing, or whether it's a behavioral pattern, it immediately habitualizes it because it takes so little resources to run the program. If you think about it, when you start doing something for the first time, it takes all of your resources, whether that's learning to drive a car or learning to sew or to play golf or whatever, because your mind is completely absorbed in the process because it has to be. But as soon as you start to become adept at it, then it starts to drop away. And that's the reason why after you learn to drive, you can be talking on your phone or listening to the radio or having a conversation with somebody, and the driving it goes into the background. So the subconscious mind, what it does is it takes a load off the brain so that the brain has more resources. I would say like more RAM, to go into work on new programs and to process stuff that's going on around you. And that's great, except for anytime you're operating under habitual behavior, there's no decision-making in it. It's just a program that's being run. And you're either in control of that or you're the victim of it.
And you react. Right? Isn't that?
Yes, and that's a great word. I tell people what we want is we want to respond. I said, we call them first responders, not first reactors, because a reaction is just that. It's a reaction, just like the executive. He just reacted. I said that, and he reacted. A response, from my perspective, has decision-making, thought, will. There's all sorts of things that go into this is what I'm going to do when this happens. That's a response to me. And we want to be responding to situations, not reacting to them. And when the subconscious fires off a thought, we're just in the thought, and we're just participating in all of the behavior and experiencing the emotional content. And we're really not in control at all.
So where do the emotions reside? If I'm hearing you correctly, we feel an emotion, the subconscious processes that emotion and gives the information to the conscious to react. Did I get that right?
Well, it gives it to the brain to react. The brain creates the thought. It's really the heart. I mean, if you look at heart math, this is what they're really saying, that it's like, they're like the seat of the consciousness is the heart. It's not the brain. Your consciousness goes outside of the brain. It's not encapsulated in the brain. And you are no more in your brain than you are in your laptop. You use the laptop computer, you use your brain. Your consciousness uses the brain. So what happens is that the feeling, the thought happens. The heart, communicates to the brain. The brain creates a thought. Now, as soon as that happens, the memory of whether this is a stressful thing or a joyous thing is encoded into that. And so the brain responds by releasing all the hormone. It just changes the blood chemistry instantly. And that's the reason why it's so important to understand this, because the brain doesn't differentiate between if it's happening now in real time, or if it's happening, like if it happened in the morning. Like one time, my older daughter, when she was in middle school, came home and I could tell something was bothering her. And I asked her, and she said, "Wow, this girl made fun of my hair today." And I said, "When was that?" And she said, "Like first thing in the morning when I walked in, I was at my locker." And I said, "Do you understand that you just keep reinfecting yourself with that? Like every time you remember that and you ruminate, you play that thought, as far as your body is concerned, the pain, the feeling, it's all happening again. And it just, your blood chemistry changes and you're experiencing that over again. And besides that, I doubt she's sitting at home thinking about it." So I said,
we are so good at that, aren't we? Aren't we, Tom? We are so good at that. And sometimes I think about, well, maybe we're addicted to that somehow, some way. We're addicted to that feeling or that stress, because that's what it really is our brain is releasing hormones and endorphins and everything to create stress, right?
Yes. And I would say that the system it's not so much that we're addicted to it. Because if I were to say to you, if something happens and you have an upsetting emotion, if I was to say to you, "Would you like to stop this thought?" you would say yes. So the thought is happening to you. I think it's more, you're not the thought, you're being thought. And I think it's not that isn't the addiction. It's the way the system works, So when you are outside of that loop, then what happens is when, and this is what I work with people, your experience, when you become the observer of what your mind is doing, you're watching it and you go, "Isn't that interesting? I taught myself to respond to this person or this situation this way. That's why I'm feeling this, because I told my subconscious, without knowing it, I told it, give me this every time this person walks in the room. Give me this every time this circumstance shows up." And it's just going, okay. Like it doesn't sit there and say, "I don't think you really want to feel this way, so maybe we'll change it. We'll tweak it a little bit." It doesn't do that. It doesn't care. It's just a system. It plays it out and then you experience it. So the key to changing that is getting outside of it, so that then that's the key to the prison door. When you get outside of the process, the loop, then you're watching it. And then you can say, "I don't want to work. I don't want to have this experience when this happens. So I'll rewrite up the program. I'll create another." Anything you're going to repeat mentally in a situation is going to become the habitual response for it. That, habits are great because, like I said, they don't take very much mental energy, to execute. But you don't have any control over it. There's no decision making on your part. It just fires it off. It's actually it's a very efficient thing. I mean, if you think about it, you don't have to learn to button your shirt every day. Like the subconscious mind figures it out. If you're walking down the street and you trip, you don't have to think of all the mechanical movements your body has to go through to figure out how to keep your balance. The subconscious mind's a million times faster than your conscious mind. Yeah, it just jumps in and takes over for you. So it's not like we don't need it. Like it's just that we don't use it.
I catch it all the time when I'm driving, right? And I'm stopped and I want to make a left-hand turn. Automatically, we hit that blinker, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not. I catch myself. I'm not even thinking about it. I just did it.
Right. That's right. And also driving the car, that's why you can drive someplace and get there and think, "I don't even remember driving here," because that's been handled in the background for you. It's not a good place to be, but
it isn't. But my truck got me home, right? My truck found the way. How does that work?
So I think that it's, I think what's important to understand with all of this is that this is the time that we live in. The time that we live in now is a time where we're proving all of this out empirically. This information, this wisdom, the way that things work has been known in the East for thousands of years, and they've had access to it. The difference is that for them, they weren't distracted by technology. We are distracted by technology, and we need to prove, because empirical science is always going to lag behind because it has to have the instrumentation to produce the empirical data. So, and if it doesn't have that, then it can't actually prove it out. Whereas in the East, they didn't they were always looking inside. They were always looking at the internal world. So they were basically scientists, just like we are scientists, but our scientists are focusing outward. Those scientists were focusing inward. But now we're seeing that it's all the same. We're coming to the same conclusions that they did, and we're proving what they have been saying for thousands of years. And I think this is what's so powerful about this, because now in the West, we can feel really comfortable investing into these, what I'll call mental technologies, and understanding that we have so much power over how we experience our day that we haven't been using. And just because we didn't know it was there, it's like electricity. Electricity has been here since creation, but we've only known it was there about 150 years. But, so for thousands of years, people were freezing in the winter and sweating in the summer and, bathing in cold water. Electricity was always there. It was always waiting to be used. So once we figured that out, and if you took somebody from 500 years ago and you brought them here today and it was evening, they'd say, do you have any candles? And we don't need candles. Just flick that switch over there. What's that? It's that thing sticking out of the wall pointing down. Just go flick it, and they go over and they flick it. They'd be like, what's going on? Like, where's this coming from? Well, it's an invisible force, and you need to go. Can you imagine what that would have seemed like to them? Like I said, what we're learning now is the actual connection that the conscious mind, which is you, has, and the control it has over your body in terms of healing it and making all sorts of things show up in your life. But you have all this control. You just haven't been using it.
It always throws me when I hear something that, especially Benjamin Franklin invented electricity. And it always just throws me for a loop. Well, he didn't invent it. He discovered
it, right.
he opened the door for it.
That's right.
Jackie, any thoughts? You've got your thinking cap on. I can see the
Well, so it sounds to me, Thomas, like this way of reaction and behavior has served us to some degree. It allows us to learn things that are repetitious. We don't have to think about them all the time. We don't have to overuse our brain in that regard. We can learn things and just do them again. So what's the downside of this, though? What has been happening to us now for so long that we have to think about learning a new way to think? because obviously you have a book, you've got 2 books now, and you're talking about this very specific problem, I guess I would call it, because of what have we been doing now, maybe unconsciously, thinking that we're actually in charge, but haven't been. So where has this led us?
Well, I think what we've done is, when I was growing up, I was told you can't control your emotions. I mean, that was just a fact. You can't control your emotions. And people would say that, oh, no, you can't control your emotions. It's just, they're your emotions. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. But see, that is what has come out, is that, no, you can control your emotions. You're just letting your subconscious mind control your emotions, but you're not your subconscious mind. And that's the thing that has really changed what our potential is. And because we now understand, that what did I say? Like, it's like 95% of the day, you're not actually creatively thinking in your head. What you're doing is just going along, and all this stuff is happening out here. And the subconscious mind is get the file for that, get the file for that, and it's just playing it out. It's putting the thought into your head, and the thought is happening to you, and you're reacting to it without even knowing it, because you've been doing that since you were a child, and it's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of generations. So we're at this pivotal point now where we were like, well, you know what, this needs to change. You have this control. You can use it or be used by it, but this is how it works. And that's the very first step. So I think that as I said, we need the subconscious mind because it's so much faster. That's the reason why, the fight or flight thing, when something happens that, is interpreted as a flight or thing, then what's going to happen is that the consciousness, it shifts that over to the subconscious because it's a million times faster. It doesn't matter if you have a cold, it shuts your immune system down. That's one of the things it does. It shuts the immune system because we don't really need that right now. We just got to get out of this situation. Like, that's how it views it. And that's the problem when people are living in fear, because especially if they're afraid of viruses and, and stuff like that, because the one thing they need to be strong is their immune system. But without knowing it, they're basically telling it to shut down, and it's going to take a run, So I think that is it's just this understanding of, look, this is how things go. And it's also understanding when is it me who's actually thinking? When is it me, and when is it the subconscious mind? And if and the reason that this is important is because we have the ability to control our thinking. If we use that ability, then we can change the environment that our body is exposed to. And this is really important for health purposes and for happiness and contentment in life, and and feeling like we're in control. Because I think most people walking around today don't feel like they're in control.
Well, they're like, I wrote about it in my book, and it's robotic, right? That's the only way I can visualize and picture it. It's just robotic and reacting to the things that occur around us based on the programs that we have.
Right. That's right. And most people don't realize that they're living a program, because just like the executive, they think that they're actually doing it. They, it's almost like a mass hypnosis. We're living in programs like the Matrix, and we don't even know that that's what we're doing. And now somebody's like shaking us and saying, hey, look, think about, this was something that I wrote about in It's Just a Thought, is that I read a study on what they called Olympic meditators. And these Olympic meditators, they wanted to see what effect this had on the brain, these people that could really get into deep meditative states. And, everybody's familiar with brainwave terms like beta, alpha, theta. And, gamma waves are brainwaves, are very, very high functioning cognitive brainwaves. And from what this article said, that the average person gets into gamma maybe 1 to 2 seconds a day, several times a day. Wow. So they brought these Olympic meditators in, and many of them were monks who meditate all day long. But there was also people from the West that just meditated a lot and were very practiced at it. And what they found was that they could drop into gamma waves and be there for hours. And they could actually function in that. And the research is that we don't even know what that's like. We don't know, what do they have access to? But the reason they could do this is because now we have this technology where you could see it on the screen. You could see what their brain was doing. You could see what brain waves they were in. And that was my point initially about, for thousands of years, these people were going into this. But they didn't have any way of explaining. They couldn't describe it, and they couldn't prove it, because it was an invisible state that they were personally, it was conscious experience that they were having. Now, and if they said, we get into this state and we have this incredible access to all sorts of stuff that you don't usually have, and people go, that right, really, yeah, there was no reason to believe them. Now, like I said, in our empirical science, now that we have this instrumentation that can actually see what happens, we go, hey, look, do you believe this? Look at what's going on there. And so now we have this feeling of like, this is a state that we are all capable of accomplishing, getting into, and who knows what our experience of that is. And that, to me, so like, it's just this, we have gotten to a point where we can say we have so much more potential than we ever with our mind and our consciousness. Now we have the science of consciousness, a new area of science, all this stuff, heart math, all these things, heart math we're into over 30 years into that now. And so we're seeing that, the heart talks to the brain, like, 9-10 times more than the brain talks to the heart. All this information is coming out, and it's slowly percolating up and more into mainstream. But we're really realizing that our thoughts are so powerful, and we need to take the responsibility of controlling them, because they're all going out there and they're impacting the consciousness of the whole and what we're all experiencing. It's a fascinating time. It's really, really fascinating. And I think
something that we should highlight is that not only can we witness, like you stated, the gamma state, but science can prove the benefits of doing that. Just like meditation, releases chemicals in the brain, and those chemicals, oxytocin and endorphins and everything else, create a better reality for us in this moment right here, right now.
Yes. And if you look at something like heart math, we now know that the heart puts out this electromagnetic energy, and it's way outside the body. Initially, what I read was they were thinking up to an 8-foot sphere around the body, but now they're saying it's actually farther, but that's as far as the instrumentation can read. But the point is that, when you are in a room full of people, all that electromagnetic energy is interfacing with, and intertwining with each other. And that energy it's not just dead energy like would light a light bulb. It's got data in it. It's got information about your feelings, how you think, all these things are in that information. And that's why, you will get next to somebody and, you'll feel like this person creeps me out, or I always feel great when I'm around this person. So like, we're starting to see that we're way bigger than our body, and we need to take, that's why I'm saying, like, when we think, there's been all these things with like Lynn McTaggart and intention and, where they've done things, and they have used their mind, like to make plants grow faster, and to think into a jar of water and change the crystal forms. And, when you look at it under a microscope, all these things, we're really realizing that we have so much power, and we need to know that, otherwise it's like, you're a guy standing in a crowded room with a 2x4 over his shoulders, and he's just turning around whacking people when he has no idea that he's doing that. That's what we're doing with our thoughts. We're putting all this toxic stuff out there, and we don't even know, it's not intentional. We don't even know we're doing it.
Yeah. Well, now, so it sounds like you're a fan of Dr. Masaru Emoto.
Yes.
At least you don't discount his scientific.
Oh, absolutely. No,
right.
I do. I think that there's absolutely truth in that.
Yeah. But there were a lot of people when he started releasing that information, thought he was crazy. And that has been part of our history too, in that many people have been killed because they were thought of as witches or heretics, because they began perhaps to tap into those gamma waves. So maybe there is this knowledge that we have deep inside that says, I am more than what I think I am. But there's also a little bit of fear that says, well, people who stepped out of that have been punished for it. Is that a possibility, that there's a little bit of that?
Oh yeah, that's the reason why
memory happening too.
Well, that's the reason why I said that what our empirical science does is it gives us a comfort. As I said, when I was young, if you said you meditated, people thought you were, woo-woo kooky.
Yeah.
Now the corporations have meditation rooms in them. You get meditation apps on your phone. Everybody goes, well, of course I meditate. Who doesn't meditate? I actually read an article by a senior executive for a Fortune 500 company, and he said he meditates every day while he's on his jet. He said, if you're not meditating, you're not making good decisions. So that's how far we've come. See, now we're comfortable because, the meditation, like all the chemicals that are released, it normalizes blood pressure and all this stuff. So everybody's, of course I meditate. Whereas if you go back 40 years, it's like, you do what? So this is kind of where we are with this stuff here, and that is the value for the West. The people in the East didn't care about it, but in the West, we feel comfortable, having this interview, talking about this, because there's hard peer-reviewed data out there to support it.
And it's not that hard, right? I can remember when I was being taught, to be a witness of my life, to pull out and be a third-party perspective of what was occurring around me. And the more I practiced that, I can tell you, Thomas, where I was exactly and what I was doing when I figured out I could choose my thoughts. It completely floored me. I was walking across a crosswalk in the middle of the street, and it just hit me, and it was profound. It was totally amazing. But it didn't take that much, other than the practice of being a witness to what was going on in my life. Is that about the rest of it?
That's why I always talk, when I talk to people, I say, I am not my thoughts. I have thoughts, some of which I create through my creativity and my analysis, but most of the thoughts I have are being given to me with good intentions, by my subconscious, and I'm just in the thought. There's a big difference between being in the thought and being the watcher of the thought. when you're in the thought, you don't have any power. You're just wherever the thought takes you is where you go. Somebody says something nasty to you, you get angry. Someone says, "Oh, you look really nice today," and you feel happy. But you're really not in control. They are in control, just like the executive. All I had to do was change my tone of voice, and I was immediately in control of them. And it's funny how this psychology. I remember I was working with some college golfers one time, and this kid said to me, he said, well, I'm going to give you a scenario. He said, I'm on the 18th hole in a tournament. I'm winning the tournament by 1 stroke, and I have to make a choice. I can go for the green, he said, but I'm going to have to go over water if I do that. So if I hit the ball and it goes in the water, then I'm going to drop a stroke, and now I'm not going to be 1 stroke ahead. He goes, or I can decide to play safe and play to the left of the water, which will put me on the fairway. He said, and I'll probably par the hole. He said, but I would be very doubtful that I would make a birdie. He said, so should I take the risk? And I said, what's interesting about that comment is the word risk. I said, because I said, that's the way you see the hole, as taking a risk. I said, so what you just did was you told your subconscious, when I step over this, go get me the swing mechanics and mental perspective I have when I feel like I'm taking a risk. I said, what you really should have said was, this is a no-brainer shot. It's just and told it to go get that. I said, but instead you've already handicapped yourself when you step up to that. And that's used. That psychology is used. I mean, I was playing golf one time with a guy who was very conceited, and I didn't know him. They just paired me up with him, and a kid who was in high school. And this guy who was very conceited kept instructing this kid and walking down the fair. And it was at a time where I was playing very well. And the kid said to me, walking down the fair, he said, I wish you would just leave me alone. I just want to play. And I said, well, we can take care of him. And he said, really? I said, oh yeah. I said, he's a sucker for this. And so we got to the next hole, and the guy had never played the course before. So he asked me where position A was off of the tee. And I said, well, I'll show you when I hit my ball. And so I hit the ball. And I knew the hole very well because I played the course all the time. I said, that's position A. But let me tell you something. Whatever you do not go right. I said, if you go right, that's jail over there. And you're looking at least a double bogey on this hole. And I knew with his ego that what would happen is, in order for him to know what not to do, he was going to have to see a picture of the ball going to the right. Because it's like that. Don't go right. Well, you see the picture of the ball going right? Okay, don't do that. And I knew he wasn't going to want me to have the satisfaction of seeing him do that. So he would have that feeling, and that was exactly what he did. He got up there and he hit his first bad shot of the day, and that ball went over there. And then we're walking down the fairway, and I told the kid, I said, we're not done with him yet. I said, we really got to collapse him. So I went over there, and I said, I'll help you find your ball, and he said, well, I can find it. I said, no, I've been over here so many times. Believe me, we found his ball, and I said, now look, here's my advice. I said, because I've been here many times. I said, do not try to go for the green. It's a very low percentage shot. You'll probably hit a tree, the ball come back and go over, and you'll be further into the trouble. I said, just take your medicine, knock the ball back on the fairway, and then just keep playing. And if you're really lucky, you'll get a par, And well, he just couldn't do that, because of his ego. So I left, and he did exactly what I said. He hit that ball, hit a tree, went over his head. He ended up with it was at least a double bogey, and that was the end of him. For the rest of the day, he was done. And my point is that he just didn't understand the psychology. Now, you couldn't do that to a pro, because they were like, they'll waste your time, because they're so knowledgeable about that. But my point is that he wasn't in control of what his mind was doing. He wasn't even aware that he wasn't in control. He just thought like he was a victim of a poor swing. But I actually created that.
Wow.
Which wasn't very nice.
First psychology, I think, is what they call that.
Yeah, it was, I just made him think about what he didn't want to do. And that's what his subconscious wasn't saying, look, the guy's playing you. Like, he just wants you to, it doesn't do that. It just goes, all right, you want to hit the ball over to the right? We'll give you those swing mechanics. And that's true to form. That's what he did.
That is hilarious. So, well, how do we start to change that then? How do we start to control what we're thinking? What's the first step or two that we need to
Well, the very first thing you have to do, and what I do with everybody, is you have to have a very simple, short meditation practice every day. Meditation is a word that it's just a label. But what you have to understand is that meditation is a skill. You can't do it wrong. That's where people fall down.
Mhm.
And you want something simple, not a guided meditation. There's nothing wrong with guided meditations, but guided meditations are asking you to think. They're saying, and now notice your feet. Are your feet relaxed? And now,
Right.
and so you have to think, and that's not what we want. What I want is for people to notice what their mind is doing without their permission. I want them to notice the thinking that is going on when they're telling their mind not to think. And it's a really eye-opening thing. I mean, I did that with high schoolers one time, and I said, I want you to sit there for 2 minutes, close your eyes, and stop thinking, which I knew they couldn't do, but they didn't. And and especially with a smartphone or all this overstimulation. Right. And so what ended up happening was in 2 minutes when they came out, they were just flabbergasted. And I couldn't do it. And I said, that's right. So if you are willing your mind to stop thinking, the driver is willing your mind to stop thinking, and it won't stop thinking, who's in charge during the day? Because it's not you. And so this was a real awakening for them. But it's, a very simple meditation. Sit quietly with your back erect, and watch, like, let's just say, watch your body breathe. Just sit there with your eyes closed for 10 minutes, and just watch your body breathe. And then what will happen, and this is where people fall down in any kind of meditation, in my experience, is the mind gets bored very quickly, because it's a problem solving machine, and if you don't give it a problem, it just goes looking for one. And so now you've given it this super simple thing to do. It gets bored in about 10 to 15 seconds, and it goes, while you're doing this, I'm going to go think about this report I got to do, or what I'm going to do after school or whatever, and it takes off. And then you just go with it, because that's the bond between you and the mind, and you go off. And then all the magic happens when you have this moment where you wake up and realize that the mind has left the task and you have followed it. And that's when everything happens. This is where people really fall down in this, because they think if they're not stopping the mind, if they don't have this perfectly still mind, that they're not good at this. And that what you want is that moment there. When you catch the mind, two things happen. One is you leave the thought and you become the observer. And you're anchored in that, and your willpower, pulling it back in, strengthens your willpower. And that's like a repetition. And so when people say to me, like, I'm really bad at it because I'm chasing my mind all the time, I just laugh. Like, that's exactly what you want. Like, you can't chase your mind if you're not noticing what your mind is doing, and you want to be the noticer. So every time that happens, then you become stronger. You become more anchored in the observer, and you have the ability to pull your mind back. So as you do this 10 minutes a day, it happens very quickly. Within a very short period of time, you start to notice that you're not your thoughts. You start to feel outside of your thoughts, and your subconscious pushes out a thought, and you look at that and you go, like, I'm not that thought. Now you have the privilege of choice. Now, I'm not saying it's just easy, like, well, now you got it, so now you can do whatever you want. It doesn't work that way. But before that, you didn't have that choice. Before that, you were just a prisoner of whatever the mind was doing. Now you're outside of the prison, and now we can talk about, okay, what are the procedures? What are you going to do? When that happens, when you have that thought, when that person that annoys you comes into the room, and you notice that I'm feeling annoyed. Like, instead of you being, there's a difference between I'm noticing I'm having an annoying thought, as opposed to I'm annoyed. When you're annoyed, you're in the behavior. When you're noticing it, now you have the potential to say, you know what, this is what I've told myself to do. I take responsibility for that, but I can just as easily teach myself to have a different reaction to that person. And you don't judge. I tell people, look, it's a skill. How do you learn skills? You have to know the mechanics, and then you repeat them over and over again, and you just get better and better at it. So don't judge, and don't judge yourself when you judge, because you're going to judge. Like, I mean, because that's what happens.
I had a really hard time with meditation and getting in that groove until I read, I think it was Wayne Dyer's book called Getting in the Gap. Yes. And he really explained it. It's that space between the notes where you want to be. And that really helped me. And once I started to practice that, it just got easier and easier and easier. But we are human, and it's easy to get out of practice, right, Tom?
It is. And I think, but there's the judging. I tell people, look, this is a practice that you really should be doing every day for the rest of your life. And I know that makes people uncomfortable because they want this closure. But I tell them, look, you brush your teeth every day. You don't brush your teeth until you're 22 and then go, well, I'm done. Like, it doesn't work that way. You accept that as something that you have to do every day. And if you can't find 10 minutes a day to completely transform your life, you need to recheck your schedule, because there's always 10 minutes in a day that you can do this. And the benefits of it, I have changed people's ability to run their corporation, with this kind of stuff. And I think that for the average person, especially now, because our brains are so overstimulated with everything that is being pumped into us. That was Nicholas Carr's book, the what the internet is doing to our brains. It's like we're asking. I kind of look at it like, if you think about when the printing press was invented, up until then there was no reason to know how to read because there wasn't anything to read. Like but once the printing press was invented, and then books started to become widespread, now you had to learn how to read. And for some, so this whole generation of people had to learn the alphabet and phonetics, and you put these syllables together, and then they create this word, and this word creates a picture in your mind, and all these things. And it was a complete paradigm shift, when that happened. Well, that's what we have had happening here. And there are many in the industry that said it was intentional. It was very intentional to addict people to their phones. It was knowledge. It was, when you addict people to their phones, it means you get the dopamine hit and the Pavlovian dog thing. And, every time your text, alert goes off, it's like, I got to see who it is. So you're like, and so what ends up happening is we have asked our brains to evolve in such a way that it can process a whole lot more data and at a very high pace. And it's evolving to do that. But then what it's losing is when we ask it to reel it in and to focus on something like sit and read a book for a couple hours. And it resists that so much because it's a faculty that we're losing. And that's another reason why meditation is it's such an important aspect of your life. It should be something that you prioritize.
Sure.
Oh my goodness, my friend, we are out of time. I hope you'll come back, Thomas. I think there's so much more in this discussion. I just hope that you would come back and we can continue this on.
I would absolutely love to. Absolutely. It'd be so much fun.
Great discussion. Jackie, any last minute thoughts?
Oh, wow.
Cool stuff.
I'm starting to think, I know that I need to do this, but it sounds challenging, but I'm up for a challenge. So it's going to be great. It's going to be fun to experiment with this. Yeah.
Challenge is a word, and it's an interpretation of the word.
That's right. Well, Joe Dispenza would say you should meditate 30 minutes every day. And if you're a really busy person, you meditate for an hour.
That's great. I like him. That's great.
Yeah. And so
and I'm only asking for 10.
Exactly. You're only asking for 10, so that's easy. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks again, Tom. It's a really cool book. You can find it. Is it on Amazon, Thomas?
Yes, it is. It should be available pretty much everywhere. But yes, it is on Amazon, and it's in Kindle too at this point.
Look for it. It's just a thought. I think we have some links up on our show page today at www.lifemasteryradio.com. Go there and check it out. Sign up for the newsletter. Jackie will put it out this week, and it will be a great blog post about this discussion. Check out our YouTube channel. We have many shows there. If you like today's show, please, please, please tell a friend about it. Tell a friend about how cool this show is with Todd and Jackie. They just have the best guests. Thomas, did you have a blast today?
I had a blast today, and I definitely want to come back, man. So I'm going to probably bug you.
Good.
That's about all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Lastly, please, please, please make it a great day, because it is all about choice. Choose to check out Tom's book. You'll dig it, I'm sure. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to Life Mastery Radio. Join Todd Allen and Jackie Bailey and their guests of leading authors, speakers, coaches, and entrepreneurs weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific. Learn to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery through stories and messages to support your well-being and most evocative dreams. Visit their website, www.lifemasteryradio.com. Join their mailing list and be notified about upcoming guests. That's lifemasteryradio.com.